And we are live here in the spoiler room. It is the Saw is Family Month in the spoiler room, and tonight's film is exactly where that phrase was very prominent in the promos. It came from number 2 and it carried over to number 3. Yes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Excuse me, Leatherface. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. A new studio, a new Leatherface, a new story. And tonight to talk about this third installment in the franchise is a wonderful crew who have been with me for quite some time, especially through the sawness of everything. First off, she is back with us. Miss Angelique is once again here to cut some wood. Hello, Angelique.
Hello. I prefer to cause it, but but I'll cut it if necessary.
I threw it and you hit it out of the park, Angelique. Well done. I set it up and you knocked it down. Well played. And oiling his chain is with me once again, Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello.
Both my hands are right where you can see them, everybody. But where I'm going, we don't need hands. No,
Most
sorry.
houses have a push start, so.
Hello.
Woo. We're already to a smoking start here. So tonight, I think Ian can give the synopsis of Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Okay. If you've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, fast forwarded about 16 years, add Viggo Mortensen.
Is Vigo.
Yes,
Vigo.
Vigo.
He is Vigo.
He's the scourge. And just make it shitty, and there you go. That's the synopsis.
Ooh.
Hot takes coming.
Look,
we get some.
I was against this movie, and then I was with this movie, and then I was against it. It's an emotional roller coaster. There's so much here that could have worked and so much here that doesn't. First of all, let's talk about the fact. Now, I just rented this off Amazon because God knows I don't own this thing. And I had not seen it in about 30 years. I saw it once when it was on home video. And I don't remember anything about it, that experience except for the part where the girl talks about having eaten a rat raw. But you've got Greg Nicotero. This is back before him and Berger and Kurtz were K&B effects that people who do Walking Dead and basically everything else that's awesome in Hollywood gore.
Right.
They were just their own little shop. You've got that crew and you do nothing with them. Every flash of violence in this movie was a cutaway to the point where I thought I had rented like one of those Christian edited versions of movies that take out all the bad parts. No, there's just every single time someone gets chainsawed or a hammer to the face or whatever, they cut away. And they don't even go back and say, but here's the bloody pile of stuff that you missed. No, nothing. I'm like, what is this? And I guess maybe they're trying to be like, well, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't have that gore. That does not work because the only reason to make a third movie in 1990 is to exploit all the stuff that, the 1980s, 1990-ness of this. And you just realize at the end of this film how brilliantly Tobe Hooper handled the sequel situation with his own brand, because not only was it gory and grotesque and disturbing, but also had style. This movie is so flat looking. The only redemptive thing I can say about quote unquote Leatherface, part 3 is Viggo Mortensen. And I loved the idea of the hitchhiker guy being, instead of some like freakazoid weirdo, an actual charismatic, handsome dude who lures people in off the road to this horrible situation. But they even squander that. Although they do some interesting stuff towards the end where instead of having it being Leatherface being this ambiguously sexual, guy, they kind of turn it into Viggo Mortensen, because at the end he's wearing this frilly like house apron and he's got red nail polish. At first I thought it was just blood, but no, he's got red painted nails. I'm like, what is going on here? The movie doesn't care though, so neither do I.
Woo! spicy. And Angelique, how do you feel about this? Let's keep it civil, folks. No, just kidding.
While this movie has its problems, to me, if you look at it from maybe an Evil Dead versus Evil Dead 2 standpoint, it was a semi-reboot, but it did tie in to the first one with Leatherface's leg. That's why he's wearing that metal cage on his leg, because he severed the muscles. They talk about Sally, and Grandpa's back, but now all of a sudden Mama's here. And there's a little Sawyer running around.
There is a little. There is, yes, a little Sawyer.
But I mean, you got bad teeth, Viggo Mortensen. This is before he got his Hollywood dental work, and he can do no wrong. And you've got Ken Faree, who is a god. So yeah, you know what? I'm here for it. He's my final in this movie.
Your final girl in this movie. Now, yeah. Ken Faree, it was a mixed bag with this film. I remember, and I teased it before when we were talking about it, with the trailer that came out, because I was big on the first one. Then the second one I dug quite a bit when I was younger. I'm like a big Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was the only two we got, and suddenly I remember this sitting in a theater, and they had the it's that just 1 minute teaser where it's a swamp and it's kind of smoky, and all of a sudden you have the kind of big figure from the back walking up to the lake, and all of a sudden that chrome saw that we see later that has the Saw's family on it comes extending out of the pond like Excalibur with the lady with the shimmering samite hand, and the saw comes out and the guy grabs it, and it's paused for a moment, then he flash cut to him turning it around, and it's Leatherface as Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I was like, yeah. I was like, that was awesome. And at least we get the chainsaw that is featured in the trailer, so we weren't gypped there. We weren't cut short there at all. But I was mixed feelings with this film. Watching it this second time, I'm with you, Ian, as far as the cutaway violence. I thought as well, because I was watching this on HBO Max. Because it was on HBO Max. They got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films on there, and I watched it, and I'm like, did I get the wrong cut? And my son was watching it with me, and he looked it up, and he's like, no, you didn't get the wrong cut. That's kind of the way it was cut. There was a few, he said there's an unrated version, which has a few more close-ups in that, but apparently overall,
it's not, I've got that one on DVD.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
And not much difference with that one?
No.
It was like they wanted to cash in on the popularity, but they didn't want to go to the extremes that it was known for. Not completely. Like they were hesitant, which is sad, because we're talking 1990. You're okay with, I mean, you could have done the on-screen stuff. And I think that's what, that's the next evolution for this film is you've got a bigger budget because it's got a bigger studio. I mean, New Line Cinema in 1990, that's a big studio at that time, doing horror left and right. And they do this, and it is a reboot, requel, as Scotty D would call it, a requel. And watching it, Viggo is one of the best parts, but watching it this time around, I don't think it's as horrible as it was the first time when I watched it. I still appreciate it. I don't like the neutered violence, but I will say this. It bucks horror tropes.
Mm-hmm.
It bucks the horror trope in that a person of color survives to the very end when you absolutely think he's going to die at least twice. He makes it to the end.
Yeah, but this is not the kind of movie to buck the trope. It's kind of like we have to have something in this movie that is of redemptive quality, and you can't even say that about Viggo Mortensen at the time because he was nobody.
Yeah, he
so
was.
It's like, we're going to be revolutionary in every single aspect. We're going to not be revolutionary except for this one thing, but no one's going to care because nobody saw this movie. Now, I like Ken Foree too, but I also feel like this is one of those kind of situations where, like, he was the big star of Dawn of the Dead, and we've got him back now. But that, again, that's not enough to make an entire film. It's just the weirdness of this being sort of a soft reboot, especially coming 4 years after Texas Chainsaw 2. Maybe I think it's probably because at the end of Texas Chainsaw 2, ostensibly everybody's dead because they blew up the mine and Leatherface had the big, saw through his stomach. But they also it's like they skipped 2 and they only wanted to acknowledge 1. They start with that awful opening crawl. At least get a Dan Larroquette sound alike or somebody who has some kind of gravitas instead of just like, there's a legend of Leatherface and the other thing in the 1981, the gas chamber.
Dollar Tree Sam Elliott.
Yes, very much so. But it's like they tried to do something they did, 2 decades later with the Blair Witch. Is almost implied that the events of the first movie were kind of like realistic, and the real Leatherface might have been put to death, but he might also still be out there. So they could do this and have this sequel where the rules of the first film don't matter because they were sort of a dramatization of the real events, and this is the real family. So you've got, now we've got Mama and the little girl. They were never in the first movie. Aha! But the first movie was a dramatization of something that the audience never knew would happen, so we can make up our own rules. Like, screw that. It's all confused and dumb.
Lightning just struck my brain. What if Mama is supposed to be Stretch?
No, she's not, because Stretch shows up in this movie.
Shit.
Yeah. And that's another crime against humanity. Because when I saw Caroline Williams in her 2-second cameo, because she actually takes a drag off the cigarette. But I was like, wait, Caroline Williams is in this movie? And I looked it up, and apparently on some commentary she had mentioned, I don't know if this was edited out or if this was just the intent of the character. They never did anything with it. But yeah, she's supposed to be the same Stretch from part 2, but she's almost like a Creighton Duke where she's like hunting down this family. But all that amounts to is 2 seconds in this movie at the very beginning, where the hero couple is driving through the desert and they come across the roadblock because they've unearthed this big mass grave and it's night and there's a police blockade. You see the media. You see a woman step into frame, take a drag off a cigarette, look kind of exasperated, and then walk off. And she's holding like a news reporter mic. That's Caroline Williams. That's Stretch. Yeah. Another reason to not like this movie.
So now I'm pissed off. I was taking this whole universe because Stretch was crazy at the end, waving the chainsaw, and I'm like, oh, maybe the saw is family, and she had the saw, and that's Mama, and now
that would have been kind of cool, especially if and that this is something that was like way forward thinking for the time. But imagine if they'd reimagined the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Stretch as not necessarily Leatherface, but finding her own band of people. You get Caroline Williams playing the heel in this movie.
That would have been a fun twist. But you're right. It opens. The tough part right away is this couple that we get, because they're on the rocks. They're taking this final trip before she travels to New York or wherever, and they're going to separate. I mean, so they're on the outs anyway, so they're not really a romantic couple, which is a little interesting take, but okay. But there's really no chemistry between them. And then they run across the mass grave part, and this is where I think New Line didn't know exactly what to do with this property, because before, the 2 other openings of this film were serious. Let's say, I mean, the first one especially, you had the corpses with the photos, And they're kind of replicating that here when you get to the mass grave. But it was done a little more serious. Here, the guy's cracking jokes and they're taking shitty dummy head, in the massive decomp pit that they find with all the bodies. But it's not handled seriously. I mean, even in the second one, Cannon's, the craziness that the opening was in 2 had a bit of more horror element too. It was like, it was ridiculous. Sure, this corpse strapped to the guy and he's cutting up. But at the same time, there was still at least a little hint of, I don't know if you want to say respect or just they knew enough to where they were going, but they didn't quite go all in with the gimmick. And in here, we get a lot of joke cracking with the corpses. And, I think I'm going to puke in my mask. Oh, not in front of the reporters. Do it over there.
Well, I mean, that is one of the problems. The other problem, and I'm, maybe I have to cast my mind back to pre-internet age, and I don't think I picked up on it when I was 13 watching this movie or whatever, but I definitely noticed it today. It's New Line Cinema. They've got this property now. They're probably hoping it's going to be a whole big thing. It's the house that Freddy built. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're going to take your new horror property, I don't know if this is an in-joke or just someone falling asleep at the wheel, but the opening credit sequence of this movie is the opening credit sequence of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. You've got close-ups of the villain doing, like in this case, is leather work. It's not Freddy putting his glove together, but it's Leatherface making his new mask almost shot for shot that same Elm Street opening. I'm like, what are you doing? And then later on at the gas station, you've got the guy looking and doing his little peep show through the wall of the bathroom. Mm-hmm. At the same time, outside of the gas station, you've got Viggo Mortensen explaining, things are different since they put in the new road off the highway. I'm like, how far can you rip off Psycho? Like, and they even
have eyes.
The hills have eyes with the young girl later on who shows up. This movie made me think of so many other films. Friday the 13th Part 7, A New Blood. William Butler, the main dude who plays Ryan in this movie, he was Michael in that film. The little girl that we mentioned played young Tina in that film. And the stunt coordinator for this movie is Kane Hodder.
Yep.
And as far as the bloodlessness that we've been kind of lamenting here, I got to go back and correct something. It is the 80s were the era of like excess blood and gore, right. But this is 1990. We're getting into the era where the MPAA really has started taking notice. Going back to Friday the 13th Part 7, John Carl Buechler fought them. They edited his Friday the 13th to shit. So maybe this was something, especially because they wanted it to be in theaters. This was not a direct-to-DVD or direct-to-VHS movie. I think it would have benefited from them just saying, screw it, we're just going to go all out. But the ratings probably wouldn't let them.
Yeah, well, that's what my thought was, too, is that that's the one thing is you've got a bigger studio now. It falls under different scrutiny than your Canon film or your independent. I mean, it does, it in a way it does, it more noticed by the MPA because, like, you're right. By 1990, the house that Freddy built, New Line, was synonymous with horror. But you're getting into the 90s where people are more aware of the extreme horror and wanting to kind of taper off on that. And maybe was part of the reason for this, because there's potential here for it to be a really gritty and dirty and grimy film. And it's kind of that. But even when we get to later on in the house, where we get to the little girl's room that it's full of bones and shit. Angelique, it felt a little polished even for that type of room, though, didn't it?
It was very Martha Stewart. Those bones were not just haphazardly thrown around. That was a tableau of human and animal skeletons.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was apologizing to Martha Stewart just in case.
Now, what you do is you take the head and you boil it for about a half an hour. And while you're doing that, you could get the flowers and spruce it up, maybe the nails for the ears. So when you hang it above your bed, it will smell fresh like daisies. But just make sure you rotate the daisies out of the mouth of the headless of the head about every 3 days. Otherwise, those daisies could smell as well.
Now, if you arrange the rib bones alternating small to large, you will create a wing effect.
But at least those bones looked real. I don't know if you guys caught this, but going back to that opening, they do show some of the corpses in close up, and it is the most cheap looking plastic ass skeletons. At first I thought they were just like doctor's office model skeletons, like intentionally, but no, they're supposed to be human remains. It's not good, and it doesn't have it's a bigger budget. It's art directed within an inch of its life, but it doesn't have that Hooper grittiness. It's got someone who doesn't understand what Tobe Hooper did with those first two movies, which they should have just gotten him back or left him alone, or left the quote unquote franchise. Why are we thinking of this movie in terms of it being a franchise? I have no idea.
It is, and there's like 4 or 5 timelines. There's a website out there that has mapped the timelines of Leatherface.
It's the TCM universe.
It is. There's like there's multiple timelines for the TCM universe, and it's like Chainsaw. I think it's Chainsaw 1, 2, and then Texas Chainsaw are in the same, and it all kind of spawns from Texas Chainsaw though, and then you have Chainsaw and then Texas Chainsaw Leatherface, which it kind of stops there, and then we get into Next Generation, which is another film entirely, but someone has mapped out, then you have the remake and that timeline, and then you have the last film, which was Leatherface, which is a prequel, but it's meant to be a prequel, I think, to the original, but not quite. There's some fans out there that there's like 4 or 5 Texas Chainsaw timelines, is what trying to follow which one goes to where.
Do any of them lead to a good movie beyond parts 1 and 2? Because I'd read that timeline.
The TCMU, yes. I don't know, but there's parts that I do enjoy of this film. It was like someone here thought they had the concept of Texas Chainsaw, but possibly didn't see or watch all of 1 and 2. To me,
it's like those SpongeBob ice cream bars. The picture looks amazing. Those bubblegum eyes and everything. It looks fantastic. But when you get it out of the package, it's like some creature from the 8th.
It's fucking horrifying.
Yeah, like Lovecraft.
But it's at least digestible. That's the difference.
My kids loved those, and I never got it because, especially, you watch them starting to melt, and it just gets worse. SpongeBob's all like, one eye starts traveling down, and the kids are just gnawing on it. You're just like, okay. But speaking of,
I still love those SpongeBob bars. I get them every time I can. It's a treat. And when I do, I think of Frank Cotton from Hellraiser saying the suffering, the sweet, sweet suffering.
Okay, now I'm just picturing you taking the wrapper off of a SpongeBob ice cream cone and hooks flying out and then ripping it apart.
You take a bite, you say, now you've forgotten how to do math.
It's not just any bite, though. It's a Cenobite.
It's a Cenobite. Oh, whew, saw that coming. I saw it coming. Speaking of bites and eating, though, we've got a cannibal family who seems to throw a lot of their food away.
Yeah.
What? I was trying to get with the pit. And they're establishing that this is their MO. They fill up a pit and then they move on, apparently, because that's where they found the pit of, the 40 or 50 skulls, which they figure are in that pit at the very beginning of the film. And then later on, we see not Hitchhiker, but Hitchhiker, but not, throwing parts of the bodies into the swamp.
Yeah, this is not the Sawyer family we have come to know and love. They would not. Yeah, the chef, the cook, would never have allowed all that product to go to waste.
No, the one leg had all kinds of meat on it. I'm like,
Yeah,
why are you?
Throw that in your crock pot with your soup beans. I'm shutting up now. Wow.
We would just like to say that the opinions of Angelique do not reflect the opinions of the spoiler room at this time about cannibalism and what you should serve with a leg of Deborah. No.
No, this is why Angelique has her camera off, because she's eating a stew right now, and her napkins are like missing persons flyers from around town.
Oh.
I am eating chili. Thank you.
Chili. Sorry, I forgot.
Chili,
no beans. No beans.
No beans. The best chili in Texas. That doesn't help your argument, Eddie Angelique, considering the last film. Eating chili does not. Is that the best beef in Texas?
Best beef in Georgia.
but
help me out here.
Yeah.
I have not. I don't even know if I've been to Texas.
Mm.
Maybe, but
yeah.
I don't remember there being this much swamp real estate. It's like they switch from Texas to the bayou and then back again. Am I missing something here? There's so much of this takes place in the swamp.
Yeah, as you go on down towards the Gulf, you can run into some swampland, like hurricane country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious that too. Well, then, and as she walks away near the end of the film, yes, we're all over the place, folks, but so is this film. As she walks away, we're back to desert too. So that swampland isn't it? The geographics weren't exactly. I'm like, huh? But
well, and also, I'm sorry, I just want to mention that the sound carries very strangely out there in the desert, because from what I could see, the limited shots we get, there's nothing for miles around. It's just open road, maybe some mountains in the distance, to the point where there's this confrontation with, in the pickup truck, and then they drive away. No one noticed or heard or saw, no pun intended, Leatherface walking up to like 5 feet away from where that truck was at the end, so we could get the sequel setup shot. I'm like, huh?
How many horror films have you seen, Ian? You need the sequel setup shop. Of course they didn't, because they're not looking in the rear view mirror. They're just looking straight ahead.
She was busy making that awesome callback pun.
But that's the thing is, that I have seen horror movie sequels and setups, but they usually make a tad more sense. Just a bit.
That's debatable. Nightmare on Elm Street had a couple that didn't make a lot of sense, but anyway.
but that takes place in the dream world, right?
Well, that's true, I guess. Well, how do you know this doesn't take place in the dream world?
It was my nightmare for 80. The movie is short too, but at times it feels like it's much longer than it is.
No globe,
It's short than long. I liked the idea of the expanded Sawyer family a bit. I was like, okay, maybe this is more, because they do mention the original old man in the opening crawl. He's the one that got blamed for the killings, and he's the one that was put to death. DB Sawyer, that was the older man who ran the gas station, if I remember correctly. DB Sawyer, he was the one that was killed and blamed for the massacre. So, and they thought in that crawl, they explain on how first off, they kind of pull a Hicks and Newt thing, which is a little bit disturbing, mentioning she died in the insane asylum. I'm like, really? That's how our heroine from the first one, she dies in the opening crawl in text. Okay, did you even need that? No. Then they talk about DB, who they're kind of going for that Ed Gein thing, mentioning how he changed characters when he put on the mask made of human skin, and that's why he got blamed and put to death in 81. So we are completely ignoring Texas Chainsaw 2 canon,
except for where Stretch shows up.
Sorry, canon. Except when Stretch shows up. Stretch, not Stretch. But so they are trying to tie it loosely to the first one, but the MO just doesn't fit. Like I said, the big thing was the pit. I didn't get the pit because I'm like, they didn't have a pit. if they were going to have a pit, it would have been the dried swimming hole maybe for the original Sawyer family, but they didn't waste their meat. They used everything. They used all the body parts, and then they made furniture and clothing out of the skin and bones. They are very efficient.
Maybe, and just a thought, because of the swampy kind of area, maybe they were just trying to make soap, because that's what adipose is.
Oh, that's true. They could be trying to make soap.
Maybe they were breaking into the beauty industry.
Oh,
I like that idea.
The Sawyer.
Well, someone say, because Viggo Mortensen, he's more polished than the rest of that crew, so maybe they had to come up with a lot of soap. They had to have something to make that house smell anything but foul. Because when they're cooking stuff in the kitchen, I'm like, that place has to stink to high heaven. No, but the only caveat to what you were saying, Mark, and I just remembered our flashback to part 2. That great scene in Texas Battleland where Dennis Hopper saws open the wall and all the entrails fall out.
That's
I don't
true.
know if that was like just cast off or maybe it had gone bad or something. I don't even know what it was doing in the walls.
Human chitlins.
Yeah, human chitlins.
Have you guys ever had chitlins?
Yeah.
I love chitlins. I can't be in the house when they're being prepared for that 8 hours, but oh man.
They don't exactly smell great when you prepare them, but when they're done, they're really good.
And if you ever has a bullet in the chamber accidentally, then you never want to eat them again.
Wow. That's happened to you?
Not to me personally.
Oh.
But knowing people weren't exactly 100% certain that things were clean.
Yeah, then they just become shitlins.
They become shitlins.
Yeah. But human chitlins can kill you. So that explains the puddle of guts.
That could be. Yeah, that would be the puddle of guts. Yeah, because the meat they smoked, but or cooked on the spit at least. But in here they did a lot more boiling. So I mean, it really seemed, this felt like, hey, we have this property, we have to make something in order to keep the rights to it, so let's toss this together. I find entertainment in it. I do like Ken Foray in there, especially that he had the machine gun and he actually like unloads into the house, and we finally get rid of Grandpa, I'm assuming, which I think Grandpa was actually dead.
Yeah, he was already dead because his eyes were popped out of their sockets.
Well, he had maggots in his eyes. So.
Oh, did he? I didn't even notice. I just noticed he wasn't moving at all. But here's the Ken Foray thing. Yeah, he's great, but it's one of those obnoxious character moments where he's wrestling with Leatherface in the swamp, and we see Leatherface put Ken Foray into the chainsaw. Now, I'm fine with the idea that maybe he just like got it really bad in the arm and that he sunk into the water, but then emerged later. But when we see him, driving up in the pickup truck and getting out and helping Michelle or whatever her name is into the truck, he's got a slight limp, but there's no indication that he had any part of him sawed into. I'm like, what?
He has his head. His head's got a couple gashes in it.
Oh, okay. So that whole part where we see it is at an odd angle, but we see his body being pushed into the saw. You're saying that a couple of little gashes is what
it cut into his head, but he pulled away. But he went in, and Leatherface thought he had died. It had got him with the saw.
What I'm saying is that injury is not consistent with the way that shot was set up.
The man survived zombies. He could survive a couple chainsaw cuts to the head.
Look, unless they insert some kind of a Chop Top-esque backstory where he was also in Nam, which would have been amazing, by the way, if he was in the same unit as Chop Top.
Oh, dude.
Because he's a survivalist. I mean, that's
yes.
He could have that same kind of a crazy attitude. I also thought it was obnoxious that the gas station attendant guy who kept there's too many people in this damn family, and they're too similar to each other. They're all like wiry, crazy looking grease balls, except one's got a hook for a hand and the other's got like a fake or a cloudy eyeball. But cloudy eyeball dude pops up with the Polaroid, and then he starts talking like Bill Moseley, kind of with that kind of like, man, $5 from $3.69. I'm like, he's trying to be all of the previous hitchhikers, but he's not the hitchhiker because that role is gone to Viggo Mortensen. This movie, there's no script here. It's just a melange of, it's like someone wrote down moments and characters from Texas 1 and 2 onto 52 cards, threw them on the stairs, and played pickup with it. And somehow that's the screenplay.
You mentioned cards. I have Texas Chainsaw Massacre playing cards.
I got those cards too.
So,
actually, I think my deck is slightly different cover artwork, but I've got those too.
They've got a different artwork, but I got these for free. So, hey,
there were too many ingredients in the casserole.
There are. I mean, there's potential here, and there's some elements that I did enjoy as being a Texas Chainsaw fan, but it is disappointing. One, the length, and two, how very it sounds weird, but it has moments, but it also is very empty. There's not really a lot. There's moments, but like where they nail her hands down this time onto the chair, I actually liked that gimmick because I'm like, they finally learned. The last two women that they tied to a chair were able to get out. So we nail those hands to the chair this time.
I also love when he's doing it. Like, I think right before he drives the nail in, Viggo Mortensen, he's pretty great in this movie. It's just he's underutilized, but he just kind of gives her the look and says, so how do you like Texas? Bang.
Well, he does get the best moments too. I mean, he has some of the best banter too with the chef, who I think is his brother. It wasn't his dad because they were about the same age, so they weren't really, but I think he was the older brother. And the other thing that got me was the inconsistency with the couple, because the couple were on the outs. She was definitely done. Glasses dude was just trying his hardest to salvage the relationship because he knows this is his last chance to get rid of his virginity. So, sorry.
That's also the name of the gas station, by the way. The Last Chance. Subtle.
It was
subtle. Yeah.
It was the last chance, but there was really no chemistry, no care, and she leaves his ass, which, in all honesty, kind of made sense because they're running through the woods, they're getting chased by Leatherface. They get chased by Leatherface in the woods after they get the accident with Ken Foray's Jeep on the road. And so they're running, and he gets his leg caught in a bear trap, and old Leatherface is coming, and she's waiting there for a minute, and also she's like, "No, fuck it." She splits, and I'm like,
he tells her to go.
He tells her to go, and she's just like, "Okay." So she splits.
Yeah, there's that look of almost disappointment on his face, where it's like, "You're not supposed to actually go." I'm just trying to be a hero, even though I'm a complete nerd.
But then they show up later, and then she's hooking up. They're hooking up him to the hooks and hanging him, and then she starts screaming and like, "Oh, my poor man!" I'm like, "You left his ass before. Now suddenly, oh, boo-hoo." I was like, although my son said that he did like this one a little better than 2, only for the fact that the scream factor was down and you didn't have as much screaming as Caroline Williams did in number 2. So he didn't like the screaming part, but there's still a lot of screaming.
That's sort of the other thing where this falls flat. I mean, I think the lead actress does a serviceable job, but and it goes back to the filmmaking, I think, and probably the direction. I believe that Marilyn Burns and I believe that Caroline Williams are going crazy during those climactic scenes. In this, like when she runs away from Leatherface and then she stops and I can't remember if she pulls out a knife or something, but she's like, come on. Yeah. And all of a sudden she's like wanting to take him on and trying to be a badass. I'm like, no, what is this? What is this garbage?
It's kind of like the difference between Barbara in original Night of the Living Dead and Barbara in the remake where she becomes Rambo.
Yeah.
That's what this did.
Great call.
Yeah, that's a good call on that, because I tell you, the two people that I do find, the characters that I find most fascinating, and unfortunately one of them gets dispatched a little too early for me, was the one survivor girl in the woods, who she was the one we saw in the beginning observing Leatherface, putting the mask together, and then she crosses paths with our survivalist character later on. I love with Benny. I loved those two. I would have loved to see those two, trying to avoid Leatherface or get back at the Sawyer family. And it's like, oh, she's interesting, and then it was like Game of Thrones. Damn it, I found her interesting. Boom, she's dead. I'm like,
well, you mentioned Hicks and Newt. I mean, she was almost an older version of the Newt character, and he wasn't quite Ellen Ripley, but he had some training, and he was put into a situation that kind of went out of control. I agree. I think if they had left out the quote unquote hero couple entirely and just had this been about Ken Foree like driving into town to get supplies or something, and all of a sudden his truck gets run off the road and he discovers this girl, and that's like the whole adventure, that would have been really cool.
Yeah, that would have been a good movie.
It would have been a better movie than this, because the girl alone, it's like, holy crap, we've got another girl who's survived the Sawyer family, but she is just too scared to go on the road because it's in the middle of nowhere, and she knows they're always looking for her. And I'm like, this is an interesting concept. She's talking about eating grubs and eating berries that felt like they were thrown up once, or I mean, that whole scene, I loved that scene between her and Benny in the woods when they come across each other and are being quiet while Leatherface is chasing the couple. I loved that whole scene.
And you believe that this girl is actually traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And traumatized because here's another missed opportunity with it's in the catchphrase of this movie that saw his family, the group of people that she was with that all got butchered in the last week. One of them was her sister. Mm-hmm. Either explore what that meant, or, maybe start off with Ken Foree discovers like a group of people, or maybe two girls and two of them are sisters and they have to survive, and maybe there's a sacrifice or something. I mean, there's potential here to do something really neat and different with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and treat it as an actual movie. This is just a bad early 90s slasher without the benefit of having any, we don't come to these movies necessarily for the plot lines or the acting. A lot of the times, especially during this era, it was just to watch the gore effects. But absent that, you're just left with, it's like watching porn, but without the good stuff included. Like, it's just 90 minutes of the guy ringing the doorbell saying, "Did someone order a pizza?"
He's trying to find the right apartment.
Yeah.
Did someone order a pizza? She opens the door in the negligee, no, and then closes the door, and he walks away. That's what this is. Roll credits. There you go. No, I mean, I found these characters. You're right. I mean, this really does feel like whoever wrote this read the back of the two Texas Chainsaw Massacre video boxes, and that's what they based their script off of. Again, we're talking 1990. We're talking a studio that kind of happens into this licensing because Canon goes belly up. God, I would have loved to see another Chainsaw film from Canon. But, it's like, oh, we have this property. We need to do something with it while the iron's still hot. Okay, let's do something. And it feels a little tossed together. It does make sense, though. Pulling up some trivia here. Thanks to Ibim. Don't read the comments. Apparently, the director, Jeff Burr, was fired toward the beginning of production. Jeff Burr was the only person to work on this film. They couldn't get anyone else to direct this movie, so they rehired the guy they fired.
Wow.
Oh.
Did they say why he was fired?
It does not say in here. It does say that the original script was more brutal with explicit gore sequences, but the producers objected to many of the scenes, one of which had a nude man being split down the middle while hung upside down. So her boyfriend was supposed to get stripped and cut upside down, which if you're familiar with Ed Gein, that's what he did to his victims. He dressed the body of one of his victims. She was hanging in his barn. There's crime pictures I may have seen few times. Anyway, I'm from Wisconsin. Leave me alone. Anyway,
if that has a big to do with just the sheer inconsistency in the story. Oh, you fired me? Yeah, now I'm going to make you something that sucks. I'm going to get the job done. It's going to be on budget.
Well,
everybody's going to get paid, but you're going to hate it.
Well, it not so much suck, but just not have any investment into it. You fire the guy for pre-production because you're disagreeing with his vision. Now you hire him back. You know, he's like, okay, I'm going to make the film because my name's going to be on it. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, okay. You know, he may have just lost the motivation to make it anything but just whatever. He also, dude, this is, I want the film that the director wanted to make. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, I thought, you know, you were going to say that they fired him early on and then they just never replaced him with anybody, because that would make sense to me, having watched the final film. But no, what were you going to say?
So, there was supposed to be a brutal unmasking scene, which revealed Leatherface is horribly disfigured. That scene was scrapped and saved because New Line wanted to use it for the next sequel, which never materialized. Eventually, they did that in the Texas Chainsaw remake. Check this out. Submitted 11 times to the MPAA. On each submission, more footage was cut out. So some of it was lost forever. Apparently, he wanted to shoot this with 16 millimeter film, and the producers said no, just like the original. Get this. The final movie. This was the final movie to be given an X certificate by the MPA before the rating was replaced by an NC-17.
What?
Before I'm assuming before they actually cut.
Okay, yeah, that makes
cut
sense.
out all the extra footage, I suspect, with that. New Line had picked up the series, hopeful it was successful. Leatherface would replace their soon-to-be completed Nightmare on Elm Street series, but the box office disappointment, failed otherwise. 3 chainsaws were used, but yeah, I mean, it looks like they wanted to make a grittier film, but the producers got scared.
Yeah, and that's something that really was driven home to me watching it this time. And I kind of touched on this last week, but Leatherface is a horror icon visually, but he's not a horror icon in terms of like being a villain. Like, he's not Pinhead, he's not Freddy Krueger, he's not really evil. He's just, you know, he was raised badly and had some bad wiring, as Bruce Wayne might say. It's, you almost have to include the entire rest of the family who is actually depraved and doing things that they know are wrong and kind of sicking this beast onto people. But, you know, you can't have, 16 horror icons in the same franchise. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, when he shows up here, he is more of like a Jason Voorhees type of a character. And that just doesn't work with what we know about Leatherface.
Well, and we touched on this before, and Angelique, you can jump in if you want, but Leatherface, out of all the horror icons, he's the one, he's still silent, semi-silent, like our other killers, Jason and Fred and Mike Myers.
Mm-hmm.
But
Michael Myers. Mike Myers can talk.
Yes. Sorry, Michael Myers. But Angelique, Leatherface still, as much as he's in the pop culture, he's stayed actually like horror even the whole way through. He's not like the happy gimmick. I've never seen him portrayed as the charismatic sort of kill. He's still, out of all the horror icons, I mean, even Pinhead, has charisma. This guy's just a brute force killing machine, and he's always stayed grimy. Would you agree to that? At least that out of the horror icons, he's actually still horror.
Yeah, but it's almost sympathetic in that, because of all the ways that he kind of approaches his victims.
Right.
He only goes after him when he's instructed to, or if he's defending his home. With this one, he tries to give Michelle the headphones so she can't hear the screams
Yeah.
that are going on. And then he wants to learn words.
Yeah, he's got to speak and say.
And that clown, I'm sorry, that clown is food.
The clown is food. Yeah, to him.
Food.
I don't understand what was wrong with that at all. It was food. I mean, and it was a clown. So, by all means, as long as you're not diabetic, though, because clowns are high in sugar.
They are.
Yikes. Yeah, it's funny because Leatherface is more like Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that great iconic look, and he's kind of scary looking. But if you get into the root of the character, Frankenstein is terrifying just because he's kind of like this mindless monster, but he's not evil. What is that? Oh, it's a little Leatherface.
It's a little Leatherface.
Oh,
isn't he cute? Isn't he adorable? He comes with a bucket of blood too, with entrails in it. But
I thought you were going to say he comes with a Dick Miller action figure.
No, he comes with a background that's got meat hooks. So there you go. Isn't it adorable? But
my Carlin over here. So,
but no, in general, I mean, Leatherface. It's interesting approach as the horror icons go. He's kind of that unusual one, and in this one too. They tried to pick someone who was similar in stature, the way they shoot him, but you could tell this is not a big Leatherface, especially when he goes to shut the barn door after he's done sewing the face the first time. I'm like, Leatherface lost weight.
Yeah, Milhoff is not a huge guy the way that Gunnar Hansen was. Yeah.
Well, and you kind of want more of that brute too. I mean, later on, you can tell the way the costuming and stuff was, they make him look bigger than what he is, in here. And, pickings are slim. So he's got
because they're throwing away all that food.
They are.
Yeah, that's true. He's not getting all of his proper nutrition. He's a growing boy.
He's a growing boy. I thought it was interesting adding the mama character. It added a little twist to the family and the dynamic in that. And, the thing is, we get two elements in here that they're trying. Again, this is where in fits and spurts, this film has interesting ideas in that you have the mama character and the little girl, where you might think you get sympathy from those, or that maybe, the victim may try to, play to the girl, band together. Could you let me go or whatnot? But we don't. The two females of this group they wear the pants in this family. Even the little girl, it's like they are the rulers of this roost, and they're the ones directing the guys. No, don't leave the finger sandwiches out too long because they will decompose.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of this, but the problem is one of the many problems. They're calling this Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which implies this is in some form of continuity of what we've seen before. So the entire time these people are on screen, I'm like, where were they? Oh, well, in the previous installment, there was never any kind of. If you're talking like if this is Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation, which, as you mentioned, is a completely different film, that implies it's a reboot or something. This movie is a soft reboot of sorts, but this is before that was really a thing. Accepting Evil Dead 2, that was an anomaly. It's just so confused, because the thing is, I can't just walk into a movie and turn off my brain, especially if it's a sequel, because I'm interested in seeing how this all ties together with what I already know and love, and this just does not at all. It's kind of like Leatherface's mask. It's just different random things patched together and slapped onto something that's supposed to have substance.
And also, I mean, the title, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, I want it to be about Leatherface.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, there's bits in there, like when he's learning to speak or he's helping with the earphones. Man, could you imagine having a Leatherface movie where it's just him having to try to survive on his own? Because in the first one, he did cook.
Yep.
He did know how to cook. could you imagine Leatherface being on his own and having some of those scenes to where there's no dialogue, just him trying to survive, filleting someone, you know, and getting the recipe wrong and just, you know, throw the cookbook in the fire because,
trying to feed the corpses of his family and they won't eat and he gets
yeah.
mad.
This could have been the first part of a trilogy where Leatherface, he breaks away from the Sawyer family. The second film, he really comes into his own, becomes a world-class chef. And the third is the Anthony Bourdain documentary Roadrunner.
No. I don't think we want to unleash Leatherface in a professional kitchen because the minute somebody complains...
Yeah. There's some fun sequences. I liked the fight between Benny and Tex, Vigo character. You knew what was coming. I mean, when he got the lighter from the girl in the woods, you knew someone was getting lit. You're like, there's that foreshadowing. It's like, oh, okay, that's going to come into play later. And it does. But it begs the question, when did Leatherface learn how to drive? Because that's the one thing that, again, why I feel like this is kind of like Highlander 2 in many respects, in that the people who, and stay with me here, the people who were making the film didn't understand the fandom or what made the first film, or in this case, the first two films, so appealing to people and the fans, and why it developed the fan base. They thought they could just slap the name on, come up with something kind of new, and the kids are going to dig it because it's a guy with a chainsaw and you got Leatherface. That's all you need, because Freddy, after a while, that's all you needed. You just needed Freddy. Nobody gave a damn about anybody else in the film. You wanted to see Robert Englund as Freddy killing people and dropping some mad puns. And that's what he did. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
But Leatherface had to be approached differently. And it's a shame, because you finally get this property with some money and some backing and studio, and they just neutered it so they could try to get it out into the theaters. And I'm just like, I remember being disappointed by the film. I still enjoyed it. I still find some enjoyment in this film. But as far as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, the first three go, it is by far the weakest of the three.
There's a Grand Canyon size drop off in quality, but I gotta say, I did like Ken Foray. The moments where I think his character shined was when he became the real voice of the audience, because he was so incredulous at this situation.
Yeah.
Like when he's right before the fight with Vigo is when the floodlights come on, and the property's like, what the hell is this place? Because there's like a monster truck coming at him and stuff, and then like when he's getting ready to fight the guy in the swamp that he throws in there, he's like, what's wrong with you people? And he's like, why are you eating people? And he says, because we were hungry. He said, have you ever heard of pizza? I could watch an entire movie of him just walking around like, I don't believe I'm trapped by these idiots.
Well, it was like when he walked up to the house too, and he looked in the window and saw, he's like, what the hell is this shit? And he's looking just in odd for a moment, like, what the hell? And he's like, oh hell. And he just starts firing into the house because he's like, fuck you all. And he just starts firing. He doesn't care because he's like, this is some crazy shit going on here.
Yeah.
You're right. He is the voice of the audience in here. He's the outsider, which again, especially for a more modern, at that time, modern horror film, that's what you have. You got to have the voice of the audience of sorts that is like, this is just wild. This is ridiculous,
Yeah, but not in that self-referential scream way that we would get like 6 years later. This is more, it's more grounded. Because it's absurd, because he's reacting to an absurd situation, but there's no way out, which is sort of one of the components of real horror.
Right.
Like, this doesn't make any sense, but I'm also about to die.
And I'm glad he didn't. And the reason he didn't was because he tested well in the audience. That shows
Was that really?
Yeah, according to trivia, check this. This is apparently the original scene that was shot. Benny and Leatherface were both supposed to succumb to their injuries in the end of the movie. So he gets Leatherface, but he also dies, and she gets away. I'm like, okay, I can buy that. All right, but
they would have had to have shot more, because him going face first into that chainsaw wouldn't have killed him, right, Mark?
Look, I'm just saying what was showed on screen. I'm not actually okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. So anyway, they were supposed to both succumb to their injuries, which kind of makes sense, a fitting end, whatever. New Line decided to shoot a new ending with the editor, Michael Noon, in which both characters survive. The director, Jeff Burr, was very surprised when he saw the movie in the cinema for the first time, because the new ending was shot without his knowledge.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Oh, wow.
Okay, all right. Let me get this straight. First, you fire me. Then, nobody wants this, so you hire me back, and I take the job, and I do the job. This is a movie. But it's not good or bad. It is a movie.
They neuter the movie then after he's done.
They tear it apart, and then you go behind my back and just put a cap on my dream? I don't think so.
I feel so bad for this director. I mean, he just this
not
is
to redeem himself, Mark. Has he made a movie without massive studio interference?
He's made indie stuff afterwards. He would go on to make Pumpkinhead 2, Puppet Master 4, Puppet Master 5. He made The Boy with X
movies.
Yeah, The Boy with X-Ray Eyes. He did Frankenstein and the Werewolf Reborn. So he went on to do indie stuff. Oh, he did Puppet Master Blitzkrieg Massacre in 2018. So, he
wanted to do things without major studio interference.
He went back to his indie roots, because before this he made a Stepfather 2, Make Room for Daddy, and from a movie, and he made From a Whisper to a Scream. So he made a couple indies. They figured, we'll get the indie guy in. So the indie guy makes the movie he wants to make after you fire and rehire him, and they're like, no, this isn't the movie we want. And they just keep whittling it down so they get that rated R rating, and you get what you've got here, and with a whole new ending that the director didn't even know about. I mean,
bless his heart.
This is one of those Hollywood horror, no pun intended, stories you hear about studios just getting too involved in a film and ruining what could have been probably a carry on and pull in your audience again. Had they left the gore and his vision that the way he wanted to, you probably would have had a lot more people in the seats, but they didn't know what they had. They were trying to tailor something that should never really have gotten a huge studio, even though it's nice to have the money behind it, because that's a whole different world than the indie cinema where you can shoot Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 with a guy with a corpse strapped to him using a chainsaw cutting up a convertible car. I mean,
Mark, I'm curious, because you mentioned this is, canon was already dissolving by this point.
Yeah.
Do you know if there was a plan for a Texas Chainsaw 3 under canon, or do you know, is that something we have to wait for Austin's book?
I'm not sure, but we do have to wait for the Canon Film Guide Volume 2, which will be coming out eventually. Austin is still working on it. Yes, I will shamelessly shill that book because it's so much fun. And I can't wait for Volume 2, which has the story of, it covers 2 years. The guy's got a book, it's thicker than Dune, with interviews and such, and it covers the 2 highlight years of canon just before the downfall. Knowing canon, I wouldn't doubt it. New Line did take a page from their book, though, and actually that teaser trailer that we all love, Angelique,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have any production crew or director yet when they made that trailer.
Huh.
They didn't even. They didn't have a director. It's just like, we'll throw this teaser up and then we'll get a director. Yeah.
But it's a hell of a teaser. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was just disappointed right out of the gate. It's kind of like this is around the same era as Alien 3.
Mm-hmm.
The original teaser for that showed the egg hovering above the planet Earth. It was like, oh my God. And then nothing happened.
Yeah. I believe the tagline too during that teaser trailer, because it was supposed to be on Earth, they show a crater with the egg in the middle of it. And it said, in space, no one can hear you scream, but on Earth, something like everyone can hear you scream, or you scream. And it was like, oh, it's coming to Earth. And then we got Alien 3, which I know some people love. God bless their hearts. But Chainsaw 3, yeah, it's a rough. Compared to the other two, this is definitely a jarring difference with it. Apparently, though, Viggo Mortensen actually accidentally had his ribs broke by Ken Foree during the truck fight. So,
wow.
The shot seemingly left in the movie, you could see Mortensen suddenly clutch after being thrown to the ground. Apparently, he did actually break a rib. So Ken got a little too into the role. Go Ken.
And after that, Viggo was a little bit Aragornery on set.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, he had spare ribs, though, so he could just attach a new one. Just pull one from the closet. His whatever sibling had plenty of them in her room. So we'll wrap it up tonight. It's a mixed bag with it. There's fun bits, and then there's a lot of not fun bits, and it's you could tell that it's chopped, that they were going for the rating, and it's unfortunate because I think there was potential here for a nice bookend to the trilogy, especially if Leatherface was supposed to succumb to his wounds along with Benny, Ken Foree's character. That's kind of like, okay, and she gets away. I kind of like that. Okay, that's a good bookend, but we don't get that because the studio was just too much into it, but not realizing what they actually had. Again, I make the Highlander 2 reference because I remember Highlander 2 and feeling the same way. I'm like, what the fuck you mean they're aliens? I literally was like that. I'm like, what? And then I watched this. I'm like, who's this family? Never mind the fact, and we'll close it up, but never mind the fact that the guy, the boyfriend, was talking to Tex, and Tex tells him to take the shortcut. But at the same time, Tex tells him you can't trust these back roads. Yet he tells him to take the shortcut.
But instead of the highway.
But at the same time, he's telling him don't trust the roads at night, but take that road. But it's almost the same distance. But take that road and not that. I don't know. That's what a lot of this film is like. I don't know. But hey, Ken Foree's in it, and that's cool. And I did enjoy him, and I am happy he survived at the end, even if the director wasn't aware that was going to happen. So there you have it, folks. Thank you for listening. We are this is the last Texas Chainsaw film we will be doing here on the spoiler room. We will be doing next week Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. Oh yeah. So that's gonna be an interesting one. And for those who join my Patreon, you will get a bonus episode. Andrew Shearer is going to try to convince me that Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation is better than I think it is. So that's going to be a fun discussion as we talk that film.
It absolutely is, Mark. I'll tell you that right now.
I haven't visited it since I first saw it, so it's going to be very interesting to watch it, and he and I are going to go mano a mano with it. And yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. But yes, folks, next week, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. And now this is where I give my crew the license to shill. So please shill away. Angelique, ladies first, the floor is yours.
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. You can find me at monstersmadnessandmagic.com. We've got some awesome things coming down the pipe. And you can also find some articles by me on Dread Central.
Nice. Very cool stuff. Yeah, I think Justin just sent me a couple audio clips. He likes to tease me with, hey, I got to talk to this guy, and he'll play an audio clip, and I'm like so jealous. I'm just like, yes, I know you got Jonathan. Yeah, yeah.
You're welcome anytime, dude.
I know. We just got to coordinate a time, but we'll see. Ian, please, sir, shill away. You got stuff to shill.
Yeah, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I also run the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel. I've been putting out way too much stuff there. I've got to stop. But yeah, I do like reviews and roundtables and interviews. And yeah, check it out, please. Please.
He's definitely a beast when it comes to putting out content as well. So yes, please check out these fine, wonderful folks' stuff. And if you're ever so inclined, you can check my stuff out too. So, but definitely check out these two fine folks and their stuff. And so, yes, folks, that's we're almost near the end of the Saws Family Month. Hope you've enjoyed this. I've just put together tonight our theme for next week.
Ooh.
It's called Space Sucks. So stay tuned for that and that lineup next month. So until then, folks, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.